A woman goes into labor on a flight to North Carolina, Carnival cruisers get held hostage at a hospital, and not everyone's going home for the holidays. Hi everybody, I'm Joe Bauer, and welcome back to Travel Tomorrow, the podcast about what's new and what's next in travel. And I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Alicia Underly Nelson. Happy holidays, Alicia.
Happy holidays to you. Are you ready?
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's going to come. It's kind of inevitable, so I'm as ready as I will ever be.
Nice. I am not.
I didn't mean to make the holidays sound like a plague. I feel like I made the holidays seem like a plague or something bad that's going to come. I'm excited about the holidays.
That's a big step for you because you kind of make everything sound like a plague. You laugh because you know it's true.
I don't make everything that seem like a plague. I get,
50%, 60,
50%,
70.
Well, but then, why is the number getting higher? I don't understand.
I think everybody that's listened from the beginning knows that the number is a little higher than 50.
I feel like it's unfair to say that I make everything seem like the plague. I just don't get super excited about the same things that I used to get excited about as a child. And I think that just shows maturity. I'm growing. I'm an adult now.
You're evolving. You're seeing the holidays in a new light. That's good.
Yeah, there you go. Hot light. Was that a pun? Like Hanukkah candles or Christmas lights?
Yes, absolutely. It was an extremely astute pun on my part. Yeah, thanks.
That was some solid yes-anding. So what do you do for the holidays? What's your thing?
This year I'm just trying to get everything done. I'm doing a bunch of radio spots and articles telling other people in the region what to do for the holidays. So for me, I'm just trying to slow down a little bit and actually enjoy some of the things that I'm writing about. So I'm going to some Christmas markets and just kind of hanging out and spending some time with family when I can. And in keeping with the theme of our episode, we do Christmas a little bit different in my family. So we don't celebrate necessarily on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. So my Christmas sort of extends all the way through December and sometimes into January. So it's just kind of about making it work and not losing your mind.
Damn, that's a long Christmas. I feel like that's longer than, that's not a Christmas day, that's a Christmas week.
Yeah, it drives my husband a little crazy because if he could do it his way, he would decorate like on Christmas Eve, then the tree would come down on the 26th, whereas I'm the opposite. I think we have daylight savings time here, so like once those days get shorter, I'm like, yep, let's put up lights, let's do holiday things, let's do whatever we can to make the dark days a little bit more cheerful, I think. So I'm all for celebrating longer if we need to.
Yeah, I mean, that part, that's the where I've shifted. As a kid, I was excited about Santa and all that stuff, but now it's just mostly keeping my mood level. I need lights. That's basically the whole thing I get excited about these days. Just give me some lights so that I can, not be depressed because it gets dark in Berlin at 3:30 now.
Yep, I know. That's how it is here, too. And you just you want to maximize that light exposure, however you can get it. Christmas lights or daylight or whatever it is. Just enjoy it while you can. So yeah, I think however you
or
can
Hanukkah lights, Alicia. Let's not single in on just Christmas, okay?
Very valid point. Hanukkah lights too.
Or Festivus. You could do Festivus. That's a fun one too.
That's true. Or you could just go straight up pagan and go real old and go straight to the old traditions where it's all about light and solstice and nature and pine and all those good things.
That's funny you mentioned the pagan thing because you haven't seen the end of the script yet, and I actually included a pagan reference, and so now it's going to seem like a brilliant callback. I probably shouldn't have spelled it out. I just screwed it up.
Oh well.
Oh well. Well, how about a first stop? You got one for us?
Now boarding.
On November 27th, which is the day before Thanksgiving and one of the biggest travel days of the year, one woman's 1 hour and 39-minute flight from Tampa, Florida to Charlotte, North Carolina was a little bit more eventful than she expected. That's because she had a baby on the jetway shortly after landing at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. And the mother's name is Nettie Arroyo, and she was 38 weeks pregnant. So she'd been cleared by her doctor to take the flight. It's an American Airlines flight, and that requires a doctor's note saying that the patient has been recently examined. And that's required for all women who are within 4 weeks of their due date, which she definitely was. And the airline only doesn't allow you to fly if you're within a week of your due date. So she was in the clear there, too. But her baby had other plans and didn't really care about the paperwork. Her water broke toward the end of the flight. She woke up her husband and the crew. A nurse was on board, and the paramedics and the fire department were on hand as she delivered a healthy baby girl around 2 p.m. in the airport, and they named the baby girl Liziana Sky, which is kind of appropriate.
That's a good name. Better than Liziana Jet Fuel.
Yeah, Sky works. Kind of, if you know the story, it's great. If you don't, it still sort of works.
Or better than Liziana Fasten Your Seatbelts or Liziana Vomit Bag.
Yeah, well, speaking of, that's terrible. I'm just going to leave that there. Can we take that?
I was trying to, there's so many ways you could take the airplane naming scheme, and I'm just saying that they did a good job by avoiding some of the ones that my mind went to.
No kidding.
Now boarding.
So on this holiday-themed episode, we wanted to talk to somebody who doesn't go home for the holidays. I'm going home for the holidays. Alicia's already home for the holidays. But what about somebody who doesn't go home for the holidays and has made that a tradition? And it turns out a good friend of mine who I went to college with, Katie Quinn, doesn't go home for the holidays, or at least hasn't been for the past 3 years. So I called up Katie to ask her a little bit about that. Katie is a video creator, host, cookbook author, and she actually has her own podcast as well, the Keep It Quirky podcast, and it's about creativity, entrepreneurship, food, and travel, and the discipline and drive to create. And so to kick things off with my conversation with Katie, I asked her to talk about some of the places she's been going to over the holidays instead of home to Ohio.
Thus far, we've spent 3 Christmases in a row. Since we moved to Europe, we've spent all of those Christmases traveling around. The first year, we just stayed in London. We were like, this is an adventure in and of itself for us. We were still pretty new to the UK, so we were like, let's stay in London. The following year, we did Norway up in the Lofoten Islands. We really wanted to catch the Northern Lights and did indeed catch them up there. And then this year, in less than a month, we will be in Oman.
So jumping off of Oman and some of the other places you've just mentioned, I want to jump ahead to some of the other questions I had written down. How do you go about picking these places, and does the culture of the country play a role at all? Because obviously, I imagine in Norway they're celebrating Christmas, but in Oman they're not celebrating Christmas. So does that play a role at all for you?
So it's been different each year. So last year with Norway, we were like, oh, this is going to be so cozy and Christmassy, right? All the snow, and like we're going to stay in this little cabin with a wood-fired stove, and it's just going to be so cozy.
It sounds very cozy.
That was, yeah, and it was great. But then this year, I think as like a reaction to last year in Norway, which was amazing, but 45 minutes of daylight every day. This year we were like total opposite, and obviously like Oman is like the desert, partially at least. It is actually a really diverse region in terms of there's mountains and a ton of stuff there, but it's going to be hot, and they obviously do not celebrate Christmas, so it's going to be a really, really different kind of Christmas, which I think, every year it's been a rejiggering of what Christmas means for me and for us, and it's kind of like fun to keep it nimble, I guess.
So how do you do that? How do you keep Christmas nimble? Have you developed any traditions while overseas that you're going to do on the 25th in Oman, regardless of what everybody else doing?
Man, that's such a good question. I want to. I really have a desire to. I have to just be truthful and say that I'm more wrapped up in the nostalgia bit of Christmas than Connor is. Just like the dynamic of our relationship. I tend to cling more to those things. So like last year on Christmas morning, like I brought hot cocoa mix, or I bought it from the from the grocery store, but it was important because that's something we do in my family. So it was important to me that like Christmas morning we drink hot cocoa, and whereas like Connor couldn't care less, but he is trying to care, I guess, for my sake. But it's been something that's interesting to me. It's like, what is Christmas? Like, what are the elements of this day that make it Christmas, and how important is it to maintain those things? So I guess to answer your question, we don't have anything super set in stone. Like, the hot chocolate thing was like kind of a miss, to be honest, because I did it and I was like, well, this wasn't that cool. Or like, I don't know, it was just different. So I don't know what we'll do this year. I think that I would like to create a tradition that maybe isn't formed just yet.
Well, since you kind of just mentioned a little bit of family traditions and family dynamics, some parents might say that a nice family tradition is coming home for Christmas. So how do you deal with those complicated family dynamics? Is it not, for some people, they might hear that, oh, we don't go home for the holidays, and that means like, oh, they don't get along with their family. But I know you travel. You just did a trip with your family, I think.
Yeah, we all just went to Scotland together, actually, which was the same place I saw you last year. Yeah, we're just in Scotland. I get along like really well with my family.
So your holidays overseas have nothing to do with that. So how did you come to that decision? Because I imagine that could change your family dynamics if you say, hey, by the way, we are not coming home for Christmas.
Right. I think that, a couple thoughts on this. First of all, the timing worked out really well with the first year we decided to do this, right? Because we had just gotten married and we had just moved to the UK. So those two things happened within 3 months of each other. And then just a handful of months after that was Christmas. So we were like, okay, guys, you know what? Like, it's our first Christmas as a married couple, and we just moved over here. Like, we're going to stay here, right? We want to just do this for ourselves. And so that was a pill that was fairly easy, I think, for our families to swallow. It's like, in other words, another way of saying, listen, guys, it's nothing personal, right? Like, just like let the leash a little looser for this, right? And then the following year, it was more contextualized as, we don't know how long we'll be in Europe. Like, this is such a unique time in our lives. Like, we don't have kids. We don't even have a pet, as much as I'm dying to get a dog. we don't yet have one. And so it just kind of was like, this isn't a forever thing, or like, who knows really, but like, let's just look at it this year. And this year we're still in Europe. We don't know how long we'll be here. We want to take advantage of this time in our lives. So again, couching it in a way of, honestly, like it is us being really selfish, I guess, but basically letting our families know, again, it's nothing personal. We feel like we need to take advantage of this time in our lives. And, another element of it is, my schedule is very flexible, but Connor's is not. He only gets a certain number of days off, and it is a schlep, as you know, you and Melanie are well aware of this. It is a schlep to go back home, right?
Schlep's a good word,
and,
yeah.
Yeah. And if you're also going to try and visit multiple families or like see friends too, and like do the whole thing, it is time intensive, and with a limited number of days away from the office for Connor, my husband, I think that from a practical logistical standpoint, we kind of like threw in those chips too. Like, logistically, it just makes sense if we stay in Europe.
Do you think that helps you though, that you're from Ohio and your husband's from Michigan, so then the conversation could be like, okay, well, if we come back, who do we get to pick? And then somebody's feelings are hurt. Whereas for me, and I'm sure a lot of people listening, you and your spouse might be from the same region. Like, if I were to ever say that, we're not coming back for the holidays this year, it wouldn't make a lick of sense to either family, because like, well, you just have to go to one place and you can see both. So how does that, does that work into your benefit or your decision making at all, to say that we're from different places? So sorry, we'll get you in another time.
Yeah, no, 100%. It absolutely does. not only because it involves even more travel for us, which we've already, would have traveled a good distance. But I think even if we were still in the States, like even if we still lived in New York City, it'd be like, oh God, wait, where do we go? Or are we going to try and split this up? And how do we split it up? I mean, you really kind of hit the nail on the head with that, Joe, actually, because even when we considered doing it like this year, we threw it out. Like, do we want to do another adventure? Do we want to make this a family Christmas? But then it's like, oh gosh, where do we go? And sure, even if we trade off every year, it's like, well, this first year, like, how do we decide the first family? And we are just avoiding it until we have to face it. Basically.
But it sounds like your parents and your in-laws are all as supportive as parents can be for such a thing.
I think so. I mean, I think that they're they don't want us to feel bad, so that I think that maybe there's a bit of tongue biting, or what's that saying? Lip
biting your tongue.
Biting your tongue. Thank you. I think that there is a part of that. But I don't know. I think that they also are trying, like, hence us all getting together in Scotland last week. It's like, okay, holiday time, let's try and work with this, and like, let's see them around this time. And then I think there's also just the hope that when we move back to the States, we'll be with them. When, if and when children come along, we'll start to be more family oriented. So I think a lot of it too is like, this is what's happening for now, and like, let's not think too far ahead.
Do you usually plan to see your parents around this time of year, like you just said, the Scottish trip, or was that just a coincidence?
No, so this year it was a planned thing. So our first year, my family, my parents and brother visited London for like a week, and then 2 weeks later, and that was November, like around Thanksgiving, and 2 weeks later, like the first week of December, Connor's parents and sister came and stayed with us. So we had a lot of family stuff right before Christmas, and in retrospect, I think that honestly, it kind of helped me glide through Christmas feeling really good about not being with them too, because I had just had a lot of, honestly, intensive time with them. They stayed with us. So it was awesome, but it was also like cool. Like I got this. Like my heart is full. Now it's adventure time. And last year, like, again, being completely honest with you, I was like, I think that was part of what was tied in with, like, I have to have my hot chocolate on Christmas morning. I was a little homesick for them. I missed them on Christmas Day because I hadn't seen my parents since sometime in the summer. We hadn't seen Connor's parents in, just as long. And that was a little harder for me emotionally. Again, Connor had no problem with it. But then this year, and again, just having come off of spending time with them, I feel really good. I'm like, awesome, let's go do Oman. Because I kind of feel like I got that family element during this time of year that I do. It is important for me. I can't lie and be like, I'm all about the adventure, as I think my husband is. Adventure is important for me, but so is family. And I think that getting that time with them, I think I'm learning that it is really important to have that as well.
Are you thinking that this is going to keep being a thing that you do over the holidays? I know you said that you're saying if and when you go back to the States, but as we were just talking about before we were recording, somebody is looking into Italian citizenship. So do you ever think about, like, how long do you do this? And if that all works out for you and you are able to stay in Europe longer, do you start thinking, like, okay, well, now that we're here for the foreseeable future, maybe you do make the effort to schlep it back to the States and do the holidays? Or do you just work it out and saying, like, this is our thing now, and we don't... I imagine that if you're not religious and the 25th is just the 25th, if you make the effort to see each other in the winter time, then you still can accomplish the the purpose of the holiday?
Yeah. I really don't know the answer to that question. It's a really good question, and I don't know the answer because I think it's a purposeful ignorance, though, because I think one way that I think, as I said before, too, to just avoid it becoming like too personal is to keep it feeling really temporary. Like, we are taking advantage of this time in our lives, and like, yeah, sure, it's also the third year in a row that we are taking advantage of this time in our lives. But you know, it's not. We're not just saying that to evade family time. It's earnest. We're like, we want to keep doing this, and it's still fun for now, and is filling. It's fulfilling for us to do this with this time. And so I think it's just going to kind of be a bit of a year by year. I mean, maybe Connor would have a different answer for you. I'm enjoying it, and I could really see it going either way, 50-50 in the future.
Well, I won't make you plot out the future just yet. Like, I'm not your parent, so I won't sit you down and say, so when's you coming back, and give you that conversation. So let's wrap up and talk a little bit about some practical things that people listening could take away. If someone were interested in following in your footsteps, what are some tips that you would give them? How do you bring up the idea to your partner, and how did that even happen to you? Was it your idea? Was it Connor's idea? And how would you suggest breaking that news to parents?
So it's always been a conversation that Connor and I have had. I don't think that, well, let's see. Connor definitely pitched Norway, specifically Norway, because I'm not much a fan of cold weather, but he got me with the Northern Lights thing. But so it's just been a conversation, like, hey, let's think about this, and let's talk about, you know, what were you thinking, and what, you know, how could this play out? I think a part of it is with the holidays, there's a lot of like ideal like thing wrapped up, like, oh, all of the traditions and all the stuff, but like in reality, it's like, again, with what we were saying before, like schlepping here and there, like, let's talk about what is this actually going to look like? Okay, we're going to fly in, we're going to get in, you know, the 23rd, we're going to be super jet lagged when like we have to go to like uncle's Christmas party. And then, I don't know, it was just kind of talking through the logistics, because it's always like really nice in this like frou-frou in my mind idea. But then talking through the reality of the given options helped clarify for us what we actually wanted to do, what we actually wanted to spend our time doing. And then also in talking to our parents, you know, right away having on the calendar, like, we can't see you now, but oh man, in February, let's meet up here, or in February, I'll come home, or, you know, I know it's grandma's birthday, I'll be back in June, or whatever. So, you know, in terms of the conversation with your family, A, not making it personal, like I've talked about before, but then B, having a backup plan of like, I'm not trying to get away from seeing you. It's just like, this is a chunk of time that we would really like to spend doing this other thing.
Again, that was Katie Quinn, and you can find out more about her at katie-quinn.com. So, Alicia, have you ever traveled over the holidays, or have you ever wanted to?
I definitely want to. I've traveled over Thanksgiving. I was in New York, had a really long layover, and caught some of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which was really fun, and then flew on to London. And honestly, I'm not invested emotionally in Thanksgiving at all, and my family does Christmas, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit different. My brother lives in Colorado, and sometimes he can get back, sometimes he can't. So sometimes our Christmas is early, sometimes it's late. Sometimes we celebrate with him when my cousins are back from all over the U.S. I have a cousin in Germany. I have Arkansas, Colorado, Nevada, California. So we're pretty flexible. So I think for me, if the opportunity came up and I could get a cheap flight and it worked, My mom would probably be the only one that would have an issue with it, but I just got my mom on her first international flight this summer, so I could always convince her to come with.
That's the thing. It's if you could bring her along with you, then I think that's a little bit of a game changer. But when you have family that, for whatever reason, needs to stay put or is just doesn't want to change their tradition, then it makes it a little bit more difficult.
I think it helps that, like, my brother lives in another state and can't always come back. So, like, now we have a tradition of being flexible. So instead of always, like, my husband's family is very different. They like to celebrate at the same time, the same day, the same system. So if you're really traditional that way, it can be an issue. But I think because my brother has already helped my mom be a little bit more flexible, like if I could plan a trip abroad the same time that he might be coming back earlier or later, that might work. But yeah, it definitely, the holidays are one of those times where it's not really just your decision or your immediate family's decision. You have so many other people to consider. But I do think that Katie made a really good point that when you have a lot of family to consider and a lot of celebrations, you might want to hit all of them, but you really do have to kind of do a cost-benefit analysis of if it even makes sense to do all of those things. Because if you're coming back, you only have a few days of vacation time and you're trying to fit 6 things into 4 days and you have travel time and jet lag to deal with. I mean, I think you can make a case to your family that that might not be worth it.
Nothing rings true for the spirit of the holidays like running a cost-benefit analysis.
Well, maybe not formally, but like at a certain point, you have to stay sane, you know? Like it doesn't feel like Christmas.
Of course.
Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you're celebrating, it's about relaxing and being with people you love. So if you have more time and energy and money to do that a week early or a week late, and you can actually spend some time together in maybe a slightly different setting, or they can come visit you, or you can break up that block of commitments a little bit. I mean, I think we all can benefit from looking at ways that we can kind of reimagine things that we've done in the past, because just because it worked 10 years ago doesn't mean that it works now. And that applies whether you're traveling for Christmas or not. I mean, you can be staying and going to the same houses that you've always gone to during Christmas, but if there's something that isn't working, it might be worth talking about it now before you bring it up on Christmas Day.
Or you run a cost-benefit analysis and you say, I'm sorry, we did the numbers and it looks like we're going to go to Barbados.
You're making me sound like a really terrible person now. Like, that's some guilt happening.
No, never.
My mom called you, didn't she?
I
know how this is going.
We tight now, we tight.
She's really happy to have an ally, an unexpected ally. I love it.
I'm happy to be her ally and pile on you.
But I think it's true, though. Like, there just comes a point where maybe you have to come home every other year and you can kind of strike that balance. I think it's really different for each family. And I like how Katie said, too, it might not be, you know, a full-time thing. It might not be a forever thing. But if you can tell people, you know, I'm stationed here, or I'm studying here, or we're doing this year and next year we'll be back and it will be the same, that can help too. I mean, it doesn't have to be like we're never coming home, the holidays will never be the same. I mean, that's not considerate either.
But you know what's also true? We have not done a postcard segment in a freaking long time. Why don't we go do one now?
I know, this is time. In late November, Travel and Leisure, People Magazine, and Good Morning America all reported that actor and director Tyler Perry helped out an Atlanta couple who were stuck in Mexico following a medical emergency. Stephen Johnson, age 31, was traveling on a Carnival Dream cruise ship with his fiancée, Tori Austin, when a ship doctor diagnosed him with diabetes and pancreatitis, which is really serious. It requires emergency hospitalization, so when the ship docked in Progreso, Mexico, they got him to a hospital and he spent 3 days in intensive care. Started getting better, but they didn't have medical insurance or travel insurance. So things got a little complicated because the hospital, they allege the hospital prevented them from leaving until they could pay the $14,000 bill. Now, the couple says things got a little dramatic, that the patient was handled roughly, windows were locked, and the staff threatened to call the police unless they paid their bill, which obviously, you know, you might be going on vacation, but you probably don't have $14,000 sitting around that you can readily access in Mexico. So Mr. Perry heard about it and paid it all off, and he actually covered their travel expenses back home, where Mr. Johnson spent some more time in a U.S. hospital, and Carnival was really nice, and in the spirit of the holidays, they waived the couple's bill from the cruise. And what I liked about this story especially is not just that Carnival was really kind, and not just that Tyler Perry was really kind, but Tori Austin, the fiance, got on Facebook on November 19th and said, everybody's asking me, like, this means you're going to stop traveling, right? And she's like, nope, we had a great time on the cruise. Carnival was really great. And they actually went out of their way to say on the record in multiple publications that they love Mexico. They think the people of Mexico are great. And they want to be really clear that their beef was with this hospital and not with the residents or the country itself, which is fabulous and exactly the right attitude to take. And she also added that they're going to go next year when they get their money situated, and she's going to have travel insurance this time. So she'll have their medical stuff covered.
This mostly makes me think that we're going to see a cruising-themed Medea movie in the next, few years.
Hey, I think Medea should take a cruise, right? Why not? She deserves it.
I did appreciate that they went out of their way to say that it wasn't Mexico and that they're going to go back, because reading that story, I could hear some of the people in the suburb I grew up in going like, oh, well, you know why it happened there? Well, that's not a surprise. That's why I'm never going there.
No, it was great. Her post was
awful voice.
Her post was honestly wonderful. It was like, this is a freak thing. It was a medical emergency. It could have happened anywhere. It had nothing to do with our trip. And she said, like, just because something bad happens doesn't mean that you quit doing it. Like, we love traveling. It's important to us. The people on the cruise and the people of this country have been great to us, with the exception of the people in this hospital. So, yeah, cool. That's the right attitude, I think. I would travel with those two anytime.
Well done. Well done, Tori Austin. And with that little Carnival cruising, scary-ish hospital travel insurance story, that is it for Travel Tomorrow in 2019. We'll be on break until January 7th, but in the meantime, if you want to give us a gift for Christmas, Hanukkah, or just fucking 'cause you're a nice person who doesn't need an old pagan holiday morphed into a Western tradition as an excuse to do something nice, you can do so by rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts. See, I told you there was going to be a callback to the pagan thing.
I see that. Perfect. My pagan friends will appreciate it.
As we all have these days.
I know,
Pagans,
right? It's a thing. Perfect. If you want to learn more about what we're up to and get all the updates for new episodes and travel stories, you can follow us on social media. We're at traveltompod on Twitter, traveltomorrowpod on Facebook, traveltomorrowpod@gmail.com if you want to drop us an email. And we do want to thank the Fiddle Revolt for the theme music and encourage you to subscribe to Travel Tomorrow wherever you get your podcasts.
And now as we're signing off, we're going to hit you back and forth on translations of Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from around the world. You want to kick it off there, Alicia?
Sure. Good Yule.
Joyeux Noël.
Feliz Navidad.
Frohe Weihnachten.
Buon Natale.
Hanukkah Sameach.
S Novim Godom.